All right, so I'm speaking about the full moon in Aries, which is coming up here on the 1st of October 2020. And it's a very interesting period because it's a climax in a way of several cycles that we've had. Kind of some long-term cycles are coming to a climax here in October 2020. This syzygy and the syzygy following it are part of that climax. And that cycle has to do with the cardinal intensity of 2020. Saturn's ingress into Capricorn in December 2017. Mars's ingress into Aries in June 2020, but then Mars's retrogradation in Aries, which placed Mars in Aries for an extended time, and it's still in Aries now and will be until January. So this cardinal intensity, this square between Saturn and Mars, comes to a climax with these two syzygies. So there's a full moon in Aries on the 1st of October, and then a new moon in Libra on the 16th of October in 2 weeks. These are really hitting, and they're bringing us into this climactic period. Now, we know, if you're following the American election, this coincides with this final build-up into that American election. And those election cycles are always rough, rocky, and intense, but this one is, I think, particularly so. All right, so let's jump into the chart here. The full moon is ruled by and co-present with this Mars retrograde, and Mars will have just made its second square with Saturn and Capricorn. They're still in what we would say is in orb, so they're still within a degree of each other but separating. And this is the second of three. Now the third will be in Taurus and Aquarius in January. And my question is, does Mars have much to give the moon here? So Mars is ruling the moon, but Mars, in a way, though it's strong in Aries, is sort of preoccupied with this move backward. You know, Mars is trying to review steps that it already took earlier in the year. And so the moon might get dragged into that. And with an election, that's often what it's about, right? We look back. What did this person do or not do? You know, what is the country? What's the state of the country? There's a certain review capacity with voting and with preparing for an election and with discussing it in the public discourse. I really think you can feel that with this full moon. The other thing is that this triggers that ongoing Mars-Saturn square, like I said, and I've been delineating this as blocked action and then the resulting simmer. And now that Saturn's direct, I'm thinking that some of the borders or boundaries or limitations, the blockages, are now a little bit more clear, right? Saturn's moving forward, so maybe we have a better sense of what's been blocking us. And hopefully we can start using those limits, whether it's self-imposed or externally imposed, and start working with those limits. You know, when we accept the limitation, sometimes we can bring it to our side and use it to our advantage. There will be this climax with Saturn and Jupiter on the winter solstice, and I think this next few months is that key zone to say, all right, the world's changed. It's clear now that what's happened is we've shifted into a whole new reality, the great reset, as some are calling it. So I think now with Saturn moving forward, it's time to accept that and then figure out how you're going to make that work for your life. And there's a number of ways to do that. Online activity seems to be popular. I think the anger, there's still potential for some frustration and anger given that Mars is moving backwards, like I said, and that's okay. You know, it's good to get angry. It's part of the grief process. You know, I'm mad that this is over now. I'm mad that the concerts haven't been happening. I'm mad that I can't see my football team or whatever it is for you, or I can't go to a big party with friends. I mean, this is part of that simmer and that rage. And as Mars moves backwards, I think we're going to have continued grief and some of the anger that's associated with grief. By the time we get in December and January, hopefully we'll be more accepting as a collective of what's happened and what we're moving into and be able to work with it, right? Mars moving direct will bring that sense of action, having stability and forward-thinking action. And here was an article, Jeff Wilsner, New York Times, for September 2020. He's talking about pandemic work-from-home injuries, that chiropractors are reporting a surge of problems as millions of workers have spent months clacking away on sofas and beds. And I do think this is a part of the Mars retrograde ruling the full moon that might come up as well. I mean, we're sitting around, we're clicking a lot. I know my shoulder, I've been doing so much more clicking since I've been working online. That, you know, there's just little nooks and crannies of the body that have been activated fresh. And I think massages, figuring out how to treat those, you know, ice baths, whatever you can do to heal, but just, you know, being aware that the bodies are changing as the blocks in reality fully sprout and are in full flowering. The other thing is here, the moon, this full moon in Aries is ruled by Venus. So it's in Venus's Egyptian term. And I think it gives that Venusian feature in the chart. Venus is actually the only other traditional planet that is not in a cardinal sign and that sees the moon via a sign-based Ptolemaic aspect. Mercury is averse to the moon. And so there's still this self-love theme that's been in play with Venus and Leo. I've really enjoyed Venus and Leo. I think Venus and Leo has been a sort of ace in the hole over the last period because it provided that overcoming sextile to Mercury when Mercury was in Libra, and now the Sun for the Sun's first, several degrees, almost first half of the Sun's time in Leo, maybe third. You'll have Venus sweetening that deal. And remember, the syzygies can lock in energy for a 2-week cycle. They're kind of a mini root chart for 2 weeks. And so I really think that self-love is something we can continue to tap into even after Venus ingresses into Virgo. And I think here about the luxurious, appreciating pleasure, appreciating the comfort, really having a sense of indulging can sometimes be exactly what we need to ignite an excitement and a passion for life. I know if I'm drained or if I'm worn out, sometimes I just want to lay in bed, and get that extra donut or whatever. And it can kind of make me happy. It turns that smile on. It's like, all right, I'm drained, I'm worn down, maybe things are overwhelming, but then that sweetness can bring in a reignition of my passion and excitement. So sometimes it's good to give ourselves little presents and gifts as a way to keep going. When I think about the tarot, the 2 cards here, the Empress, which it relates to Venus, and then you have the Force, which relates to Leo. And so the 2 cards in the tarot that are reflecting symbolically this Venus and Leo placement show us how this luxuriating can sometimes reignite our ability to control. And they say it too with dieting. You have one cheat day, and that's what I think this is getting into. 1 or 2 cheat days are times when it's like, all right, I'm going to do whatever I want. I'm going to eat the donut. So the other thing is that both the rulers of the full moon that we've looked at, Venus as the Egyptian term ruler, Mars as the domicile ruler, they're both in fire signs. And there's a fire focus here with 5 of the 9 points that I look at are in cardinal signs, and 4 of the 5 are in those fire signs, the moon, Mars, Venus, and then the south node in Sagittarius. So there's a burning sense of fire here, and fire can be the drive, the passion, the spirit, right? The spirit of life that keeps us, engaged and moving ahead. And I think that motivation, how can that propel you over the next 2 weeks and even over this Mars retrograde? Keeping sight, like regularly saying, what do I want in life? Pausing and saying, what is my designing the life in the mind with that kind of vivacity and that life force. Even if it's not into action right now with Mars being retrograde, we can still do actions in the imagination, and that will later come to fruition when the skies are more supportive of action. But I think staying in touch with that fire, that life fire that we all have, this energy is really good for that. And I saw this story, this was out of the New Indian Express, 17th September 2020, Krish Kunal, a 16-year-old boy, he spent his lockdown into writing a novel. And this one was on social ills. And I mean, that's one way to look at this. Sometimes the inner creative life force can just come out when there's these other restrictions. So maybe something that you want to do right now is blocked in your life, but maybe there's a fire and a kind of replacement energetic where you can shift that over to something you never considered and never thought you'd have time for. And I think also, if you can't do much right now, like here's a story of someone doing maybe something extraordinary, writing a novel, but if you can't do much right now, that's okay too. We're in a really rough year. Fall 2020 is that climax of a very difficult year, and Saturn is still the king of the skies because Saturn rules almost everything in the sky right now, and Saturn is overcoming Mars. And so while Mars is also strong, Saturn has that earlier, more advantageous position. So Saturn's the king. Saturn did just move direct. So maybe, like I said earlier, there's a sense of seeing clearly that restriction and understanding how we can use it as we move forward. But tapping out and just letting Saturn win, there's nothing wrong with that. I know some people that are just saying, I'm taking the next month or 2 off. All right, this fixed star, Algenib, or Algenib. This fixed star is closely conjoined the moon, the full moon. It's at 18 degree minutes away from the full moon in Aries here. It's an interesting fixed star. It's the farthest tip of Pegasus, but it's that wing of Pegasus, that far off wing. And when we go into the story of Pegasus, the basic theme here is that Bellerophon gets on Pegasus and after taming Pegasus and decides to fly to heaven and then falls off, but Pegasus continues, gets into heaven. According to Ptolemy, it's Mars and Mercury, and you can really see that Mars is the ambition, the wanting to act. Mercury is maybe deception or thinking, self-deception even. But I think that that's what this is about. Robson says ambition, vanity, intuition, enthusiasm, bad judgment. And that's what I think. It's this hidden feature of this Mars retrograde. I think this is a great signification for Mars retrograde is ambition, but that's bad judgment, misplaced ambition. You think you can do something, or I think I can do something, but I can't really. I've been foolhardy. I've sold myself a bad, batch of something, and then it doesn't turn out well. There's a blockage to my over-ambitious endeavor. And, Bellerophon falls off the horse, tries to go to heaven, falls off the horse. And Robson delineates with the moon here, dishonor, lost by scandal, exiled or forced to flee, ill health or trouble through writings. And I think about October with scandal. And the first thing that comes to mind here is October surprise. When we have an election year, this is where scandal can really emerge. The October surprise is this American political jargon for the month before the election. There's all kinds of muckraking and stories that are published and scandals that emerge. But I think that this 2-week period after the 1 October full moon here in Aries, we're going to see some scandals emerge. And this fixed star conjunction's really supporting the emergence of that. Okay. The transits that are coming up after this full moon, so it's about 15 days until the new moon. There's some interesting transits. The big sign change is that Venus enters Virgo. We also have that Sun, Mars opposition, the weak Sun in Libra opposing the retrograde Mars in Aries. And then Mercury will station retrograde on the 14th of October. That's a big deal. The interpretive principle that I focus on during a solar season, what is the sun's ruler and what is the condition of that ruler in the transiting sky? It's a way we can get unique delineation that's ever changing, right? Because every time the sun moves through Libra, that condition of Venus is always a little different. That's why we do astrology, because there's these fingerprint-like markers in the unfolding reality that are so fresh and unique. So right now in Libra season, the beginning, like I said earlier, Venus in Leo has that really sweet mutual reception with the sun until Venus enters Virgo on the 2nd of October. We lose that sweet mutual reception. The sun is in fall in Libra, kind of asking us to step aside, not be so centered on our own ideas and our own perceptions, give deference to group members and other people. And when Venus was helping the sun in Libra, I think we had an easier job of that. We lose that, like this says, when Venus enters Virgo. And so it's a time when I think we might struggle with how to play in groups, how to be a team member. That's one of the big things I'm seeing of this Libra season, and that will trigger here on the 2nd of October, right after this full moon in Aries. Sometimes it's as simple as asking a question, hey, how are you feeling? What do you think? And really deferring to people, leading with that deferral, I think is a really good strategy to cope with this difficult solar placement, especially as it's opposed Mars and Aries, and that's going to be applying all through the next 2 weeks. And then the Mercury retrograde, another layer of it is that Venus is going to be in Virgo, ruled by Mercury, Mercury stationing direct and then moving backward in the sky. And I was thinking here there could be flavors of past lovers returning. Often we say Venus retrograde is about old flames coming back, but Venus in Virgo ruled by Mercury while Mercury's retrograde, I think will give another, it's another outlet for that type of manifestation of old lovers, past flames, old relationships coming back up, and even friendships, asking for clarity, asking for closure. You don't have to respond to those if you don't feel like you want to, by the way. That's just how life is. But notice when you get those texts, it's just the skies. The Mercury retrogrades last for 3 weeks, so it'll be over and that's in the next syzygy cycle. Mercury will come back into Libra within the few hours of Venus entering Libra. So there's an interesting support for Mercury towards the end of this retrograde. But like I said, that's in the next syzygy cycle. Here's a chart I wanted to point out and talk about. This is that 13th October 2020 chart. You see that the Sun, Mars, and Jupiter are in this T-square. The Sun Jupiter square is separating, but in this chart you have the station of Mercury in 12 Scorpio, the Sun applying to oppose Mars retrograde in Aries, and like I was saying earlier, I think this could be a great potential for relationship triggers. So really be careful on the 13th. The relationships could just get triggered, but there's this feature here with Mercury ruled by Mars going backward in the sky. That I think can ask us to review our lives and review our emotional life in particular. Questions like, who am I? What emotional reactions destabilize my sense of self? Analyzing the reactions. Venus in Virgo is journaling, creative journaling. Mercury itself can signify journaling, and Mercury in this fixed water sign, this emotive kind of locked in emotion that can come with Scorpio, it really is a good time to analyze reactions and do inventories on the self. All right, and then this Mercury retrograde actually hits some of the exact same degrees, many of the same degrees as that Venus retrograde in 2018. That was in fall 2018. And I think you might want to explore that October 2018 time in your relational life, because this Mercury retrograde 2020 is hitting almost the exact degree range. I always like to bring in something positive, maybe something to look forward to. This is the moon it's waning, so this might be decreasing things in our lives, resting, lessening, letting go, but the moon will be enclosed between benefic rays here on the 14th of October. The moon has a conjunction with Venus in Virgo, and then applies to a trine with Jupiter and Capricorn. Jupiter's direct now, Venus is direct. I think this is a little sweet spot, a little hidden sweet spot in this difficult astro weather. And I look to the lunar mansions always. When I see a benefic enclosure with the moon, I love using the lunar mansions. They're just so powerful. This is the 13th mansion, Al-Awa, and this mansion ends at 17 degrees, 8 degree minutes, 34 degrees seconds. So know that the moon's positioning in this mansion completes before the moon completes its trine to Jupiter. But this is a mansion that's good for love, sexual love, trade and finances, beginning creative projects, traveling, gardening, healing, building, cutting and washing hair. This is lunarium.co.uk, a lovely resource for looking at the mansions. And the essence of it, according to Lunarium, is achievement of desire, increase in benevolence. And just look for this moment. I have here in the Budapest chart, I can get a nice moon conjoined the MC by degree at 10 in the morning. And so it's a real nice feature of where I'm at with a fixed sign, rising sign. Look for it in your area. Try to time when the moon is in the powerful 11th house, 10th house, 1st house. Get the moon conjoined the midheaven or the ascendant to really charge the moon as it's in that particular degree range, which is about 13 degrees Virgo to 17 degrees Virgo. And see if you can't do something to capture this really beautiful side of Virgo, really, because Virgo, remember, ruled by the moon, triplicity, ruled by Venus by triplicity. And it's an earth sign. And so it's it's all about love, the body, trading, because Mercury rules Virgo, and Mercury's trade and finances. Earth signs are finances. So it's a really sweet pocket of energy here. 14 October, enjoy it. Here's an article, MGB, Mind Body Green, that's a popular site. They have an article earlier in 28 February this year, Sacred Sexuality, how to have sacred spiritual sex. And anytime I see something in the astrology that's talking about sexual activities, I do think it's worth mentioning this. Sex, is it a purely physical act? I don't think so. I think there's a direct connection to the divine, as Julie Payet here says in this article. She has a whole thing here about what it means to have the sacred spiritual sex, and this doesn't have to be with a sex partner, and it doesn't have to be, orgasmic. It can be just, there's all kinds of ways into the sexuality. Tarot reading. So I'm changing my tarot reading. My channel is actually gonna grow here with some tarot because I've been a tarot practitioner for quite a long time. I want to add back in the Tarot Marseille, which is the deck that I really came to love, appreciate, and utilize the most through my several years of tarot studies, in which I currently still use. The King of Clubs is the first card here. This is the Emperor, right? It's associated with Aries, the sign of Aries. So very apropos for this full moon in Aries. And with Mars retrograde, the Emperor, there's a sense of just reviewing your empire, maybe. What is in your purview? What is in your responsibility? What do you have to take care of on a daily basis? I just had a Twitter exchange where someone was talking about just those next steps in a breakdown of their day. I do that a lot. Like, what do I have to do the next hour? That if I can do it, it's a victory. But I think this Mars retrograde is more about little victories in our domain of control. And that's how I'm seeing the King of Clubs in this context, is exerting control over what we can control, even if that's something that's small. And then the Chariot here. The Chariot is also a cardinal sign in terms of its correspondence. It's Cancer. And this is all about that cardinal cross, the climax of the 2020 cardinal energy. So that the Chariot would appear is also very fitting. The Chariot is associated with the moon because the moon rules Cancer. And I just think about grounding into the physical. Again, it's about the domain of control, I feel like. But this can also imply movement, right? It can imply getting stable with my selfhood, with my body, with my heart, with my mind, with my ability to maybe envision my future. And then using that power that's contained in my selfhood to move into the world from a place of inner stability, inner strength that really can't be taken from me if I get very clear with myself. And this goes to those lunar significations of foresight that you find in Vedic Valens. I think that there's something to be said about the foresight being connected to having like a mind-body alignment. So trying to get into just some movement of the physical can sometimes open up those visions, those inner visions of what the future can look like. I've been talking to a lot of people about the yoga practice or just their stretching practices as a way to start the day. So I think about that here with the Chariot card. Okay, and as always, you can book astrology readings with me and tarot readings with me on my website, sjanderson144.com. Just go to the readings tab at the top if you're on a computer, or just click that first link, click here to schedule a reading if you're on a phone. And as always, you can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at sjanderson144.